On this call today are three people. First is Jerry Koch-Gonzalez. Jerry is part of two organizations promoting sociocracy. One is Sociocracy for All, that's the nonprofit, and he's also part of the Sociocracy Consulting Group, TSCG. He's also, which comes handy for this webinar today, part of New England NVC, Nonviolent Communication. He's a certified trainer for NVC. Then we have me, I'm part of Sociocracy for All. Gina is in the process of publishing a book, which has the title Heart-to-Heart Systems for Enlivening Connection, a manual for parents and teachers. She's a first grade teacher. You want to say something about the book real quick?
Hello, everybody. So I am in the process of writing a book about systems for parents and teachers to use to deal with conflict in the home or in the classroom. And what I've said to Jennifer so many times, and she to me, is that systems are our best friend. And the reason why we say that is because when we're in conflict, which could happen if you're giving feedback, it's hard to really think. And if the system has already done the thinking, we can rely on the system to use in a format. So I think that's it for me.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. For now, there's one fun fact for you, and that is both Jerry, I, and Gina live only 300 feet from each other. We actually literally see their door from our door and vice versa. So, and the place where we live is a co-housing community in Western Massachusetts, and we've been operating our community using sociocracy for quite a few years. All right, so what are we going to do today? The first piece is sort of a lecture piece, a presentation. We're going to talk about sociocracy in general, which is also called dynamic governance, then feedback in general, and then Gina is going to give us a very doable way of giving feedback and some background about it. Sociocracy is also called dynamic governance. There's no difference between those two terms. And it's a governance method. Those of you who came here for the NVC part, we're embedding this in sociocracy, and sociocracy builds a lot on feedback. So it's a governance method that combines egalitarian pieces with a way of doing things very effectively. The basic concept is that nobody is ignored. This is basically sociocracy is a set of tools that all support the values of transparency, effectiveness, and equivalence. So how can we do things without ignoring anybody, but still get stuff done? There are three areas that are bundled in sociocracy. One is the way we do our work together. We organize work in circles that each have a domain and something they do, which is their aim. We make decisions by consent. Consent is slightly different from consensus. Consent means nobody has an objection, so that's why what we try to indicate with those thumbs, not all going perfectly up, but you know, I'm okay with it, I can work with it, I do not have an objection. That's consent decision making that we use in sociocracy. And the other piece, that's what we're focusing on today, is the continuous learning. So only if we do something, you know, we plan something, we carry it out, we measure with it, we're successful, we adapt, we can get better. I'm gonna pass on to Jerry now.
So the context today, feedback. So feedback in sociocracy, so the purpose of feedback is so that we can continue to evolve. We experiment and we evolve. And the feedback loop, as we talk about it, is you start off with leading, you make a plan, and then you do something, you carry out that plan, and then you measure what has been the result of what you did, and then you evaluate. You take in your measure and you evaluate and make a new plan, and so then that's a continuous cycle: lead, do, measure, lead, do, measure. A lot of the intent with sociocracy is the bias towards doing something, and in order to affirm that bias, we work in smaller steps, something that's safe enough to try. So what can we do right now that we can take some action and then get some feedback so that we can then take the next level of action? So not always trying to have the perfect decision right away, but the best decision over time by making many decisions. So where do we actually practice feedback in sociocracy? We would be doing it in a workflow feedback. For example, how can we improve putting on a webinar? You know, there's a whole process that we go through to put on a webinar. We could continually learn and improve our workflow. There is product feedback or service feedback. How can we get some more feedback about the content of the webinar and how it worked for people? Then there is, in any organization that we're a part of, there is, we're making policies. So how do we get feedback to the policies that we are creating? We can do that when we have a policy proposal. We can hear people's quick reactions to what they think of the proposal. That's the quick reaction round, feedback. We can, in the process of consenting or objecting to a proposed policy, we're giving, again, more feedback. And when we do the evaluation of how did this policy work, you know, how effective was it? That's another location of feedback. We have a lot of meetings. So then there is the meeting evaluation. We close every meeting with some evaluation of, it could be about the product. How do we feel about how productive we were, what we got done at the meeting? And it can also be about the process. You know, how do we feel about what went on among us as people working together in the meeting? Again, always looking to see how can we make the next meeting better given the evaluation that we've received. And then there's performance reviews, which are not like the traditional feedback that we might get in a company where it's, you know, what we always fear performance reviews is what you did wrong. In sociocracy, we're looking at it's more of a collaborative and self-responsible approach to a performance review. And this is not, at some point we'll do a webinar just on performance reviews. And lastly, in this list, or not in this order, but is direct feedback to, you know, to someone. And that is what we'd like to be focusing in this session. And I'm going to turn this over to Gina.
Hello, everyone. So I am Gina, and I have been invited to talk about feedback more on a personal level. And so I'm going to start with a quote from Mickey Cashdan, who is one of my mentors. What she says is the true function of feedback is that it's a gift that one human being gives another freely for the benefit of both. And what I like about that is that it shows the mutuality from any given feedback, and thinking of it as a gift, and that it's free. And then the next thing to say, I think, that is really the crux of the matter that brings us from the paradigm of feedback that we're used to, which is basically criticism, to the kind of feedback that we're proposing today and beyond. And that is to really think of feedback as information or data. And I think I can, as a first grade teacher, I think a really good example for thinking of feedback as data is just, you know, we do a lot of assessment as teachers. And in the past, as a student, I know taking a test, I thought of that as, you know, basically finding out what I'm doing wrong as a student. But nowadays, as teachers, we are taught to use our assessments to drive our instruction. Any feedback that we're getting from evaluating a student on their reading level or how they took in the math unit that we just gave, whatever we find that those students are doing, that's meant for us to be better teachers, not for the students to be evaluated and judged. And that's what I even say to my students, that, you know, we're having an assessment today because I have to find out how I'm doing teaching you. So that's one way of looking at information and data. If you're riding a bicycle and there's two people on bicycles and you're traveling along, the person in the back often can see, you know, sort of the big view. And that person might see that the friend in front is avoiding a lot of potholes without even trying to avoid them. They've just lucked out. You know, might say to your friend, okay, we got to stop. I just have to tell you there's a lot of potholes here and you've missed them by good luck. But if you pay closer attention, you'll be in better shape. So that's feedback about using it as information. And of course, you're going to really appreciate that. So that's the bicycle metaphor. Okay. So why do we give feedback? And this is already sort of alluded to earlier. And I think basically we give it and want to receive it if we do feel like we want to receive it, to grow and to learn. And it's just going to keep moving us forward. The other thing is, in terms of the person giving the feedback, it puts them in the position of making a contribution. And a contribution is a universal need that we all have and that we all really enjoy. Another way of looking at growing and learning is to meet goals, and same thing, moving forward. And then I like this one, in aligning ourselves with our values. So I had an experience recently where I was experiencing a person in my life in a negative way, and I wanted to run away from the experience. And when I thought about it, I realized that it wasn't going to help anybody, and especially I wasn't going to be aligned with my own values of communication that I really value, and respect for myself and others, if I didn't give the person feedback. It sort of goes along with being self-responsible. I know that this happens in the classroom a lot, where kids come up to me and say, somebody just swore, somebody just used a curse word, and they want me to go and extinguish that in some way. And I'll say to them, well, it's going to be really powerful if you let that person know how that affected you. So you're taking responsibility for your own problem. I'm not having the problem. I might actually be another student in the classroom that doesn't mind hearing curse words. So in fact, might enjoy it. So that's the self-responsibility thing. And then also being self-respectful. And I mentioned that earlier, that, in my own situation, I felt like I wasn't treating myself with respect or the other person, to try to run away from giving feedback. So those are the reasons that I came up with for why we give feedback. Why is receiving feedback so hard? And let's face it, it can be very challenging. And I love the image that Jennifer put up here with the person hiding under the pillows, because I think that says it all. There was a time in my life where my boss called me on the phone and said she wanted to have a meeting with me. And as soon as I got that phone call, I knew that she wanted to let me know that something that I had said and done impacted her very negatively. And that's exactly what I wanted to do, is hide under those pillows. On the other hand, once it was all over and looking back at it, it was really helpful to not only her, but also to me. So it's just hard. And the reason why is because the existing model that we have for receiving and giving feedback contains a lot of judgment. So we hear the word feedback and it's like, oh no, we cringe. That puts us in a place of defensiveness. And I think the pillows is a good example of defensiveness. And behind that defensiveness, if we think about it, really is a desire to be seen and accepted. It's protection for something that's really important underneath, which is to be seen. That's pretty basic. And that's why it's hard to receive feedback. Okay, what's this guy doing? Why is giving feedback so hard? Okay, so this poor guy is in a position of having to give some feedback, but of course, by the look on his face, he knows it's gonna hurt. So the basic reason why it's so hard to give feedback is because we know it's so hard to receive feedback. And that's based on our existing model. The next slide is about a feedback form that I designed a couple of years ago in co-housing. And it was just a way, I'm on a circle in co-housing called Care and Counsel, and that's sort of keeping our pulse on the emotional health of the community. So this came out of that circle, and I wanted to design something that was going to be simple. And that's why it only has 3 parts to it. And I wanted it to be user-friendly. It's like in a letter form. The first part talks about what my experience is. So, I experienced our last circle meeting in a way that, I noticed that people were over voicing each other. I noticed that, people's volumes increased, and I was having an experience of distress. That's sort of an example. The next part is what I appreciate. So I might want to say in my feedback form to the person that I want to give information to, that even though I was having this negative experience, that I appreciate that person for a number of things, like for speaking their mind, for bringing up a point that needed to be brought up, or in this case, when we're talking about overvoicing and high volume, I might appreciate that the person, has a lot of passion about a particular topic. And then the last part, what I was hoping for, that's just a way to say how I would have wanted it to be different. So I might be hoping for the facilitator to maybe, pause the meeting to quiet everybody down and to have everybody speak one at a time, something like that. So that's an example of a feedback form, and the idea is, keep it simple, give the information, be as positive as you can, and be as objective as you can. All right. Okay, so now we're going to break this down into the 3 parts, and Jerry and I were giving each other feedback yesterday about this form, and Jerry pointed out to me, which was actually very helpful feedback, that the whole thing of the simplicity of my form was really not specific enough. And he so we talked about it and then tried to figure out a way to make it a little more explicit. So if you look at my experience and break that down into what I'm feeling and needing, that's an NVC way of approaching this form. So you might say, in describing my experience, I might say something like, I'm feeling distressed because I'm needing more respect in this meeting right now. The other way of looking at this that I really liked when Jerry and I were talking about this is he broke it down into external and internal witnessing. If you're looking at it externally, you're talking about what you're seeing and what you're hearing. So examples are, I heard the volume increase. I noticed 2 people talking at the same time. And then if you talk about your internal experience, and I like the idea of, the internal witness, and he said, so we came up with some examples between the 2 of us. Me feeling tense, me shutting down, losing attention, and longing for a sense of connection. That's an example of a need. So yeah, that's the breakdown for my experience. And then the next slide breaks down the next part of the simplistic form, which is the appreciation aspect of it. And what we came up with is when we think about this part of the feedback to the other person, it's sort of an empathic way of experiencing the person that we're in conflict with, or that it doesn't necessarily have to be a conflict. It can be feedback, feedback about how much you enjoyed the person. But in this case, if you're guessing what the person is feeling and needing and putting that into words, that's being empathic to the other person. So an example would be, I like that you stand up for your values. I appreciate that you're honest, things like that. And then the third part about the simplistic form, I keep referring to it as the simplistic form because we now have 2 forms. We have the simple form and then we have the more elaborate form. What I was or am hoping for, so if you're filling out a feedback form, which we have done in co-housing before, and giving it to the person as opposed to speaking to them, then you're talking about the past, something that's already happened. But if you're in the moment giving feedback, then you're talking in the present. So that's why we did the was/am. So let's see some examples for what I was hoping for next time, da 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 da, or I wish we had da 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 da. And then this little part is another sort of NVC lens to what I was wishing for, hoping for, and that is making it into a request. So would you be willing to decrease your volume because it would help me pay closer attention, something like that. I would love to hear how what I just said landed on you is another way of making a request. So you say something to the person and then you just ask them for some feedback actually about how they took that communication in. I wish you could say when judgments are occurring. So this is an example of an experience I just had with somebody who I was experiencing as being very judgmental in the meeting, but not owning their judgments. So I actually said to the person, I wish you could say when your judgments are occurring. So instead of saying, well, this is ridiculous, saying I have a judgment about what's going on and I want to communicate it and with as much respect as I can. That covers the elaborate aspect of the simple feedback form. I just had an experience recently where I sent somebody an email and told them that I had filled out a feedback form, and if they were open to hearing it, that I could give it to them. But if they weren't, that I was fine with that. And at the same time, I was inviting them to give me feedback. So what ended up happening in that situation is that person said, yes, I would like to have a feedback form. And that's as far as it went. So at this point, that person is, I'm concluding, is not open to receiving feedback. They got the feedback form, took a look at it, and decided they couldn't do anything beyond looking at that feedback form. And for me, that's not a bad thing, because the experience of filling out the form for me and sort of getting clear and clean about my relationship was good enough for me. And if in terms of what she needs, that's sort of business. So I actually feel like that was a good conclusion in that situation. Children in the community have their own system resolving conflicts. So when there's ever an issue that involves a child, we're kind of all set there, because they've been trained and they're actually using the systems that I've written this book about. So cool. If somebody is complaining about a kid to a parent, for example, the parent can just say to the kid, wow, you get to talk to so-and-so about this problem, and here are all your options for doing that. And that's one of the systems that we have. It's called the Wheel of Choice. And so we have a Wheel of Choice in our kids' room in the community.
So the kids have it together.
Kids have it together, yeah. The grown-ups don't have it as together. But that's no surprise.
Right. Thank you.
One of the core pieces around this work for me is, when we're giving feedback to somebody else, I'm responding to my unmet needs. What didn't work for me? So I'm owning that. And the other element is trying to imagine why they did what they did. Because, from the nonviolent communication perspective, everything we do to meet needs. So even though I didn't like what the other person did, it was coming from some attempt to meet their needs. And that's the place where, if I can get to that place of empathetic guessing, at least, about what might have motivated the other person, then I've shifted. I've shifted from blaming them to being curious about what was going on for them and being interested in that dialogue of, here's what went on for me, I'm interested in what went on for you. With that intentionality, then communication is, often possible, not always, but often possible. Without that intentionality, then, none of us, as Gina said earlier, is who wants to receive blame with no opportunity really other than, yes, I'm bad, as a response.
So, one of my mantras is that judgments, it's not that judgments are not okay. Judgments are, judgments are like it's like a mine You know, you have to be very careful when you're in judgment mode. And, you know, judgments are natural, so we have to honor that. On the other hand, you know, they can be really detrimental if you're not conscious that you're in judgment mode. So what I like to do is, what I like to say is that, you know, if you're in judgment, it's okay as long as you own your judgments. So owning judgments is like it's like another whole nuanced level of dealing with judgment. And I think you can't even say, I have some judgments here. You have to say, you have to be like hitting them over the head with a brick about, I am in judgment right now. This is my problem. I am going to try and express my judgments with as much respect as possible, and then invite the person that you're expressing your judgments to give you any kind of feedback about whether you're succeeding at being respectful, because it is like I say, it's like a red flag is an understatement when you're in judgment mode, but it doesn't mean you have to suppress judgment. So I don't know, does that make sense? So just owning your judgment, you know, and very explicitly doing it.
And I wanted to say one clarification for me around when Gina's talking about judgment. My understanding is she's talking about moralistic judgment, right and wrong judgment, not the kind of judgment of should I turn left here or should I turn right here. You know,
I understand that.
there is kind of those assessments, those judgments that we make in life that we couldn't live without. Give yourself a timeout. Like, well, I notice I'm kind of really triggered here. I want to just take a breath. I want to come back to you in a few minutes or tomorrow. Whatever, I do not want to respond in anger at that moment. I want to figure out how can I create some space for myself to go and look at what's going on for me. Why am I so angry? You know, okay, if I understand why I got so triggered, you know, I'll calm down and I'll be able to be in a more position to be curious about, okay, why did they do what they did? So I'm always looking to calm myself down by being clear about what's going on for me so that I can create space in me to listen to the other. And then that will help, you know, at least provide the opportunity for the dialogue to continue.
And I would just add, this is something we haven't said talking about judgment, but in NVC terms, what we're doing is we're trying to uncover the need that's underneath the judgment, because it's a need that's either being met or not met. So in a case of, you know, feeling that you're in a triggered state, I know for me, what I end up doing often is a lot of self-judgment. So it's like, oh my God, I'm so mad, I can't even talk. I'm such a terrible person. This happens to me way too often in life. If I can get to the point of saying, oh, right, there's a need under there that's driving this anger, then I can be more humane with myself and give myself empathy, and then proceed without the anger getting in the way.
So this is what we have to offer in SOFA. We have a lot of videos in Jerry's YouTube channel. I will send you links to that in the follow-up email to this. We have those webinars. We always try to hit something that sort of enriches people's experience, no matter whether they're already doing sociocracy or not. We have a training that is all online. Some of you who are here are either alumni of that or are about to start. So some of the calls we know really well through our online trainings. This is an immersion training where people actually are being put into groups, sort of a pop-up organization where people get to experience what sociocracy is like when you actually do it. We have something that is coming up that is a study group curriculum, videos that help you teach and learn sociocracy together in a group wherever your home is, so you could even do it online with people. If you're interested in that right now, contact us, but we're ready to launch this in about 3 or 4 weeks. And we are working in a manual to be published. So that's how you can learn sociocracy. Of course, there are many other people who offer content on sociocracy. And Jerry sounds like
well, all this is available through the sociocracyforall.org website.
That's a good point. Then some NVC, there's a ton of information about NVC. If this was your first contact with NVC, start with a classic. Marshall Rosenberg, Nonviolent Communication. a very entertaining read. And then what we really recommend is Miki Kashtan's books. She has written a lot, and she has a very active blog too. You will find things about her if you just Google her name. Reading those two books, and of course the classic by Rosenberg, would totally transform everything that you think about is what is true or isn't true. Then there's Bay NVC, New England NVC, and many more that have some great offers. Both Gina and Jerry are part of New England NVC. And there's the NVC Academy. We have a little tradition, and that is that we unmute everybody, and then you get to wave and say bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.